In a house where silence suffocated every room, where the air carried the weight of things unsaid, a young girl named Amara learned that quietness could be both a shield and a weapon. She had once believed that a home was a place of safety, a refuge from the world outside. But in her home, the real danger lurked in the very walls meant to protect her. She was 12 when she first understood that monsters weren't just in fairy tales. They wore familiar faces, sat at the dinner table, and spoke in soft, deceptive tones. Her father was one of them. At first, the touches seemed accidental, a lingering hand on her shoulder, fingers brushing against her skin in ways that made her shiver. Then, the visits to her room at night began. She would hear the door creak open, feel the weight of his presence long before his footsteps reached her bed. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to run, to hide, but she was trapped. Amara wanted to tell someone, to scream until the walls of her home collapsed under the truth. And so, one evening, she forced the words out to the only person who was supposed to love her unconditionally, her mother. Her mother barely glanced up from the pot she was stirring. "Hush, Amara. Not now. Not now." She had expected shock, maybe even anger, but not this. Not indifference. The betrayal stung more than the terror itself. That night, she curled up in her bed, hugging her knees to her chest, the fear clawing at her insides. If her mother would not listen, then who would? Days turned into weeks, then months. The abuse did not stop, it grew worse. And then came Uncle Felix. Felix was not her real uncle. He was her father's friend, a man who always wore a false grin, a man whose eyes never smiled. He came often, sat in their living room, drinking palm wine with her father, laughing over things she did not understand. But Amara knew what he was. She knew because she saw the way he watched her. One evening, while the house buzzed with guests, Felix found her in the hallway. He cornered her, his breath reeking of alcohol, his voice thick with something darker than the night. "You're growing up so beautifully, Amara," he whispered. "Your father says you're a special girl." She pushed past him, her heart hammering. That night, she tried to tell her mother again, her voice shaking as she whispered, "It's not just Dad. Felix too." A sharp slap silenced her. Her mother's eyes burned with something unreadable. "Enough of this nonsense, Amara. Do you want to destroy this family?" And just like that, Amara understood. Her mother had made her choice. She was alone. If there was one person in that house who saw her, truly saw her, it was David, her cousin. He was 2 years older, living with them temporarily while his parents were away for work. David noticed the way she flinched when someone walked too close. He saw the shadows in her eyes, the way she kept to herself, avoiding the company of men. He didn't press her, didn't force her to talk, but he gave her something she didn't realize she needed, quiet understanding. One night, when the weight of her nightmares felt unbearable, she knocked on his door. He opened it without a word and let her in. Sitting on the floor, she finally broke. "I can't take it anymore," she whispered. "I feel like I'm drowning." David hesitated, then took her hand. "You're not alone, Amara. You have me." Those words became her lifeline. Time passed, and in the darkness of their shared pain, something unspoken bloomed. It was in the way David looked at her, not with pity, but with something softer, something forbidden. They both knew it was wrong, but love doesn't follow rules. It grows where it is planted, even in broken places. The first time he kissed her, it was not out of desire but out of comfort, a silent promise that she was worth something more than the pain she had endured. The kiss was fleeting, a stolen moment in a house filled with ghosts. Neither spoke of it, but the air between them changed. One night, Felix returned. Drunk and laughing, he stumbled through the house, calling for her. She locked herself in her room, pressing her back against the door, praying he wouldn't find his way in. She heard David's voice outside, sharp and angry. "Leave her alone." A crash. A thud. A groan of pain. When she dared to peek outside, she found David standing over Felix, his knuckles bloody, his chest rising and falling with rage. And that was the moment Amara knew they could never stay here. They left before dawn, slipping through the back door, their breaths shallow with fear. Amara clutched David's hand as they ran, as if letting go would mean losing everything. The bus ride away from their nightmare felt unreal. Every mile put distance between them and the past, yet the ghosts still clung to their skin. But for the first time in her life, Amara felt something close to hope. The first few years were not easy. They struggled, fought for survival, but they were free. They built a life together, one rick at a time, forging a family out of the love they were once denied. Years later, sitting in the warmth of the sun, watching their children play, Amara whispered, "We made it." David smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Yes, we did." And just like that, the echoes of her past faded into nothing more than a distant memory. From the ruins of silence, they built a symphony of love and resilience. Some scars never fully fade, but they no longer define the story.